Make sure you take notes. Take a nap. Husbands. Okay, so right off the bat on the other list, it was why husbands pursue your wives. So we're going to start with the same thing on this list. Wives, pursue your husbands. That shouldn't change. We're also going to pursue our husbands. Now, a lot of wives, I like this, a lot of wives go, you know, I don't really remember how I used to pursue my husband. Well, I'm going to help remind you for a second, okay? Because you did pursue him back before you got married because you were trying to let him know you were interested in him. So I can think of 2 or 3 things, maybe 4 things that you did that pursued your husband. And we'll talk about these more in detail in just a minute. But you, when you went on dates, when he would pick you up for a date and you had been getting ready, you'd walk out for the date and you would want him to look at you and say one word. Do you remember what it was? That's it. Wow, you look good. You would dress up for him. Now, we're going to talk about what that means in a minute. And when you do go on a date and he does go, let's go out, wear something that he's going to go, wow, you look amazing. You flirted with him. That's another way you pursued him before marriage. You flirted with him. And I don't know how you flirted. I don't know if you just touched him a lot, if you twirled your hair or batted your eyes, whatever it was, but he liked it. And he still likes it. That hasn't changed. I've not ever met a man ever that has said, I just really hate it when my wife flirts with me. That man does not exist, okay? So flirt. One of the ways you flirted was with your words. You gave lots of praise. You bragged on him pre-marriage a lot about ridiculous things. Things that if you could go back and hear what you said now, back then you'd go, oh, I can't believe I said that. You said things like everything from, oh, I like that shirt that you've got on, or that color looks good on you, or I like your truck, you know, or I like your dog, and you are so strong, and you are so nice. And you literally, he wanted to take you on dates because you made him feel so good about himself. He was like a lost puppy that said, I got to go and hang out with this girl. She makes me feel so good. And you know what? He still likes that. He still wants to be your knight in shining armor. That has not changed. Wives, real quick, let me ask you a quick question. How many of your husbands can do the simplest job around the house? Simplest job. And he shows up to tell you what he's done like he wants some kind of reward. Any wives out there? I see y'all laughing at each other. There you go. I did that and still do every now and then. Your husband can, you know, I'm just giving you an example, load a bowl in the dishwasher and then he's got to come tell you and you're like, why are you telling me this, you know? And you know what it is? He simply still wants to be that knight in shining armor. He just wants you to go, good job, baby. You did so good, you know? Whatever it was that he did, he still likes it when you brag on him. Don't stop doing that. Whatever you did pre-marriage that your husband fell in love with should still be things you're doing after you're married. Those are so important things. Don't stop pursuing him. We talked last night. Love is an action. Show your husband you love him with your action. So let's look at some ways. All these will be action-oriented ways, okay? Now, this ties right in what we were just talking about. Give your husband lots of praise publicly and privately. Publicly and privately. You want to throw in anything right here before I take off? Okay. Brag on him in front of your kids. And guys, do this for your wife as well. Tell your kids you got a great dad. Tell your mom, tell your kids you got a great mom. I remember specifically several years ago I got a new shirt, don't know where it came from, but I probably got it in 10 minutes and didn't try it on before I bought it. But I was at church that night and some lady mentioned, I like your new shirt, Trey. Is that new? And I said, it is. And she said, yellow looks good on you. And there was a bunch of us kind of standing around. Church was over. We were just kind of visiting. And Lee said, he does look good in that shirt, but he looks good in every color. And I remember thinking, I floated out to the car that night. And it was like, yeah, she likes me, you know. We never get tired of our wives bragging on us. Give your husband praise publicly and privately. He needs to hear that you still think that he is awesome. He still wants to be that knight in shining armor. Praise is one of those things. You have the ability to build him up, to tell him you are an awesome husband and he'll act like it. You're a great dad and he'll act like it, but you also have the ability to really pull him down if you choose more criticism than you do praise. And so your words have the amazing ability to build him up or to pull him down. So use those words powerfully to turn him into that super husband because you're bragging on him all the time. Most of the time when you brag on him for something that you think he ought to know to do that, you brag on him a little bit and he'll do it again tomorrow. Because he'll think, well, she liked that, I'm going to do that again. Give your husband lots of praise privately, publicly, and privately. Give your marriage priority over kids. Or can I rephrase this one? Don't neglect your marriage while raising your kids. That's really the best way to say this. Don't neglect your marriage while raising your kids. That is a common theme in many, many marriages today, is that couples neglect their marriage because they want to focus all their attention on their kids. And that's really not the way God designed things. Yeah, there is I may have hit the mute button. There is a spike in the divorce rate at about 22, 24. It's empty nest is what it is. For a long time, it took people who studied that kind of thing, they were trying to figure out why is it that there's a spike in the divorce rate after 20-something years of marriage. And it's because you've got a husband and a wife who have done nothing but be mom and dad for 18, 22, 24 years. And then that last kid leaves the home and they are like, I really don't know you, you know. I don't have a relationship with you outside of what we had with the kids. And there is still that spike in that divorce rate. I can tell you this, when you have kids at home, if you're dating and holding hands and being affectionate and doing all those things married couples do, when they leave home, you'll still be doing it and those will come very natural. It is absolutely essential that you place being married on a front burner somewhere instead of just going, we'll get back to that someday.
Yeah. We want what's best for our kids. That's totally natural. That's a good thing to want what's best for our kids. And we want to give them all of these ways to develop their interests and figure out what they're good at. And so we get them in all different kinds of sports activities, maybe art lessons, music lessons, gymnastics. I mean, you name it. And we're having them try it out to see what they're good at and what they like to do. And the next thing you know, our calendar is getting more full and we're driving them here and there and we're watching this game and we're working this concession stand and then we still have full-time jobs and we still have to do, the cooking, cleaning, laundry, dishes, help with homework, all of those things. And we just find ourselves dropping in bed exhausted every night, like I mentioned earlier. And we've got to guard against we've got to guard against our whole lives just revolving around the kids' activities and make sure that we're making time to date, to spend time together. We don't want to give each other our leftovers at the end of the day. We want to give each other the best of ourselves. Make sure you're keeping your marriage a priority. Kids are important. We want what's best for them. But our marriage came first, and it's going to be there after the kids leave. So you've got to keep on nourishing that marriage while the kids grow.
Doesn't mean that you love somebody more than another. Doesn't mean you neglect somebody more than another. It simply means we are going to work hard to be a married couple while we have kids in our home and not just mom and dad. And that is one of the things that is really, really hard on marriages today, is that couples neglect those marriages while they're raising their kids. We did a weekend, getaway weekend marriage workshop in Fort Worth, Texas a while back that had no child care. It was one of those, don't bring your kids, just come for a weekend without kids. And we asked, because we were there, how many of you sitting here felt guilty about, honestly, felt a little guilty about leaving your kids this weekend? And about half the hands came up. And that's normal. That's okay. You just kind of go, oh, I hate to leave my kids. They're my responsibility. But it's one of the best things you can do for your kids is to focus on your marriage, which is kind of what we're doing this weekend. One of the best things you can do for your kids. Had a couple a few years ago that their marriage was struggling. And we were doing everything we could to get them going in the right direction. And we finally talked them into, would you go with us for a weekend workshop where it's just us, y'all, other couples, don't bring your kids. And they said, we will go. We need this. Our marriage needs it. We're not going to make it if we don't. The whole weekend was planned. Everything was good. 2 days before the event, they came over and said, we can't go. And we said, why? What in the world would ever come up? We were like, take vacation from work if you have to. And they said, they have rescheduled our son's baseball game. And he's got a baseball game this Saturday. And I said, in a really nice way, so, we don't want him to think we don't support him. We don't want him to think we would choose something over his baseball game. And I said, how many baseball games does he have? Well, he's got 16. And we're like, you can make 15, but give up this one game to go this weekend to this retreat that you so desperately need. And they basically just said, we can't. We're sorry. I said, grandparents can go. They said, we just can't go and not support him. 1 year later, almost to the date, they file for divorce. And I remember thinking, of course, you always think, if you could go back and talk to that little boy and go, would you rather have your mom and dad at a game, where you could tell them in front of mom and dad, would you rather have your mom and dad come to a game or your mom and dad still married together as mom and dad today? There's no doubt what that boy would have said. Don't come to my game. And yet, they prioritized the wrong thing. We've got to be people who realize I've got to take care of us so I can take care of us. And we're not asking anybody to neglect their children. Just don't neglect your marriage while you raise your children. Let's look at number 3. Make your love life sizzle. This is an important part of marriage. God's not embarrassed to talk about it. We're going to talk about it just for a few minutes. Intimacy in marriage is an important part of marriage. Something that you should be talking about with your spouse on a regular basis. Everything from frequency to whatever it is, but this is a healthy thing. And of course, we have it on the list for the wives, but this would work just as good on the husband's list. Make your love life sizzle.
So just let me throw out some statistics for that. So statistically speaking, men have the higher sex drive in the marriage, but we've had many women come up to us after workshops and say, that's just not the case in our marriage. So we did a little research and found out that about 1 out of every 4 women have the higher sex drive than their husbands. And so if that's your marriage, there is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your husband. There could be some underlying causes. We're not going to go into all of that. But just know you can flip-flop what we're saying. We just, usually we speak to the general population. We go with what the statistics say. Statistically speaking, men have the higher sex drive. So that's why we put this on the wives list, to make sure that you're making your love life sizzle.
Yeah, making sure it's a priority. So let's look at several little things here. 9 ways to ruin your sex life, for your married sex life. Number 1, let your kids sleep in your bed. These are all things don't do, okay? And I know it's easy to do sometimes. Don't let your kids sleep in your bed. If they show up on occasion, that's one thing. If they get scared at night and show up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I had a bad dream, that's one thing. But if every night they're in your bed, that's not the best thing for your intimacy. It's really, really not. And we know that occasionally we meet couples who go, we co-sleep with our children. I've never heard of their spouse that goes, hey, this is a great idea and I'm all in for it too. One of the best things you can do is prioritize going, we're going to get our kids in their beds. Sometimes there'll be a night where you go, hey, y'all come make a pallet and come sleep in our room with us. And there'll be some nights when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We used to do that, and I'd think, where did this kid come from? I have no clue when he climbed in bed with us. But don't be guilty of every night having all your kids in bed with you. And we met a couple like that not long ago who said every night all of our kids sleep in our bed. And we're like, how do you even sleep? They had 4 kids. And we kind of worked out a plan to help them get those kids out of bed. Be cautious about that. Make privacy a priority. Make privacy a priority. That means we like to put it this way. We think every master bedroom door should have a lock on it. And if you're going, do we have a lock on our door? If you don't, stop on the way home at your local hardware store and get a lock, okay? Privacy is a priority. Because we had small kids. Putting multiple small kids down at nighttime thinking, let's go have some time together. It's kind of like the whack-a-mole game. You get one down, one pops up, and you're never sure when they're all asleep at one time. And so you spend all your time going, can we go to the room now? Just go to the room and lock the door. Make privacy a priority. That's a very healthy thing to do.
Letting yourself go, that can ruin your sex life. Now, this encompasses a large area. It really does. We realize that, after 35 years of marriage, we don't look like we looked when we first got married. Age and gravity play mean tricks on the body. But we do our best with what we have. We try to take care of our health together. We work out together, we go on walks, we try to eat sensibly. I mean, there are things that you can do, and that sends a message of love to your spouse, that I want to be the best version of myself so that I can be around for you as long as possible. That's what that means. This could also just be, maybe just wearing something visually pleasing to bed. Us girls, we kind of tend to go for the big oversized t-shirt, big comfy sweats, whatever it is. Maybe you just need to go to the special drawer every once in a while. Hopefully you have a special drawer.
We had a lady tell us the other night, I thought it was great. She said, don't always sleep in the not tonight gown. And it took me a second for her to catch that. She said, you tell them ladies, they don't always have to pick out the not tonight gown. And I thought, that's pretty good.
Yes. So take care of yourselves physically, emotionally. This could be, maybe you just need to, maybe you have some things going on in your past. You might need to see a counselor. There's no shame in that. Sometimes we let pride get in the way of having the best sexual intimacy that we can, and we should not let pride get in the way. If you need to go see a counselor and work through some things in your past, do that. If you need to go to a doctor for some physical things that might be going on, do that. Don't let pride get in the way of that. What else? I feel like I'm leaving something out, but.
No, I think you did well.
Okay.
I think you did well. Look at this one. We talked about this one. Mention it again.
Flirting, yes. Flirting is good. It's healthy. If you stop doing that, that's hard on your sex life. Flirting is just a great way to keep that pursuit alive.
Send a little flirty text to your spouse, any of those things. Saying no more than you say yes. We did a podcast recently where we encouraged couples to try instead of no, not tonight, the rain check. Say, hey, how about a rain check? And try and make good on the rain check in the next 48 hours. That's not a bad way to do things, because not every night is going to work, but try to say yes more than you say no. A lack of communication is one of those things that will ruin your sex life. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to, there's some great books. Dr. Ed Wheat has a book called Intended for Pleasure. We read that one years ago. It was so good for us early in our marriage to read that book. Dr. Kevin Lehman has a book called Sheet Music, also on sexual intimacy. That might be your book that you want to get to read together. Just a really good book that will encourage you to talk about stuff, things that you'll go, oh, I didn't know this. But a lack of communication. So we always feel like the married couples who have the best intimacy are those who are not afraid to talk about stuff. Let's look at the next one.
Making everything more important than sex. This is that, not guarding your calendar, dropping in bed exhausted every night. Make sure that you are not making everything else more important and pushing it to the back burner and saying, maybe later, maybe later.
Yeah. Look at this one, getting stuck in a rut.
If you feel like you're in a rut, so to speak, then grab one of those books that we just mentioned. The Sheet Music by Dr. Kevin Leman. That is a really, really good book. He's a Christian author, but he lays it all out there in plain English, and it's a good book to read together. It will help you to discuss some things and get you out of a rut.
Another way to ruin things is to make it all about you. You should make sure your spouse is enjoying it as well. Find out what they like, what works for them, what makes them comfortable. Don't make it all about, even if you're the person in the marriage with the higher sex drive, don't make it all about you. Make it about them as well, so that they can enjoy things as well. So all of these are just good, common sense things that ought to be a part of your marriage. We always like to throw this in here. This is important. The person with the lower sex drive, or wives, we put wives be willing to initiate more often, which honestly we think should be about equal percentage of times that the husband and a wife kind of take turns initiating. If one person does all the initiating sexually, they tend to feel like they're begging. And they will eventually stop, and that's not healthy for your marriage. So take turns initiating. And wives, one of the reasons he loves for you to initiate is, one, he doesn't know when you're in the mood. And so if you're in the mood, let him know. And sometimes wives will go, how do I know if he's in the mood? Is he breathing? Does he have air coming in and out his lungs? He probably is, or he will be pretty soon. It makes him feel desired, and he loves having you involved.
Yes. So one thing that I didn't mention, we talk about this more in our marriage workshop, but I think it's important to mention the book Sheet Music that I just referred to. When we first got that, I just was kind of reading the chapter titles and looking at that, and there was a chapter that was titled The Greatest Enemy of Sex. And so that really got my curiosity up, and I wanted to know immediately what he thought was the greatest enemy. So I flipped over to, I believe, chapter 9 and started, scanning that chapter. And he very quickly started talking about busyness and weariness. And that's what we've talked about. We just get so busy and so tired, and we just put it off. And that is more so the greatest enemy of sex for women. But then he goes on later in the chapter to talk about the greatest enemy for men is that not feeling desired by his wife. And so it's so very important that you are the one to pursue on occasion, because he wants to feel needed and wanted and desired by you.
Yeah, that is true. And can we say one more thing that we think is really important? God created sexual intimacy in your marriage to it's not just for pleasure. There's power in it. It connects you as husband and wife and reconnects you on a regular basis. It's a very, very healthy thing for your marriage. It was created to connect you with your spouse. And if you've ever had a long dry spell for some reason where you haven't been with your spouse and you haven't felt very connected, you may have noticed that after you are sexually intimate with your spouse, you feel very close and very connected to your spouse. That is called oxytocin. It's what God puts in your body to remind you, and it is released in sexual intimacy, in sex with your spouse. It's released so that it reminds you, this is my man, this is my woman, and I love them. This is my husband, my wife. There is so much power in this, and you just can't ignore it and not talk about it. So let's go back and let's get these last four. We talked about dress with an aim to please your spouse. Can we just say husbands and wives? This fits. And what this means is, listen to this real quick. Before marriage, we dressed up for one another. Before marriage, hey, she's coming over, I got to at least put on a clean shirt, one that doesn't have a hole in it, right? And you'd get up and do that. And if he's coming over, you'd put on something that looked nice. Now, once you get married, you know what we do? We do this the opposite. It's like, I'm home, I've had on nice clothes all day, and you walk in the door and your spouse hasn't seen you in anything nice, and you walk in the door going, I cannot wait to get out of these clothes. Where are my pajama bottoms? You know, where are my house shoes or my oversized t-shirt? We tend, after we're married, to just dress down all the time because it's what we're comfortable in, and we get that. But make sure you find some time to dress up for one another. We were talking about this last night. To share that story, that was excellent.
So I have a friend that her husband works in overalls. I mean, that's what he wears to work. And she said, I literally never see him in anything but those overalls. And her son just got married, and she said, you know, he dressed up in a suit and he looked so handsome. I never see him, you know, dressed up and looking nice like that. So she was, you know, it just says a lot that, guys, you know, yes, maybe you have to wear a certain something for work all the time, but when you take her out on a date, maybe, you know, wear something other than the overalls or whatever it is that you wear most of the time, because she likes you to dress up for her too.
Yeah. So not a black t-shirt every day. Black t-shirt. I would wear a black t-shirt every day if I could get away with that. You know what's better than one black t-shirt to wear every day? 2 black t-shirts to wear every day. So yeah, take an interest in something that he likes to do.
Yeah, so, you know, this fits on both lists. Trey talked about he has worked hard to take an interest in things that I like, and I have also done the same, you know, in our marriage for him to work on things that he likes to do. Early in marriage, he started watching NASCAR on Sundays, and I was like, what is this on my television? You know, I didn't know anything about it, and he had a really good buddy that was into NASCAR and had talked to him about it, and so Trey started watching it, and man, I just thought I'd rather just go watch the toilet brush go round and round the toilet bowl than watch these cars go round and round the track. It was so, I just did not get it. But it wasn't going away. It was like every Sunday afternoon it was on. It's kind of, you know, it falls in the lull between football and baseball, and so it was on. And I started watching it, you know, just started kind of trying to figure out, okay, who are these different drivers that drive these cars, and what is this all about? And pretty soon I was starting to pick up some things. I was like, okay, this isn't terrible. I'll root for this person, and maybe he'll win a race every once in a while. And Trey suggested we go to a race in person because we don't live far from Texas Motor Speedway. So we did that one weekend, and it was so much fun to actually go in person and to hear all the sounds and see the sights and some of the weird people. The people watching is the most favorite.
You want a little fun? Go to a NASCAR race. That's entertainment right there.
Very entertaining. So, but yeah, I thought, okay, if I can get trips out of this deal, you know, we can start going to different racetracks or whatever. And we've been to a few. So it became something fun that we could do together, that we could follow together, that gives us something to talk about. When our boys got a little bit older, they got a little more into baseball. And so that became a thing, you know, that they really loved. They love to play. They love to watch baseball. They love to go to baseball games. And baseball was something else I just didn't know anything about. They went one weekend to Arlington to a game, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of little tiny Childress, and we're going to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I'm going to shop while y'all are going to the game. You can just drop me off. I'm going to shop. Pick me up 4 hours later. And anyway, that's what we did. And on the way home, they were so excited, and they just talked about the game the whole time. And I thought, I have no clue what they're talking about, and I felt like I was missing out. And so, you know, when we got home over the next few weeks, I made it a point when they were watching baseball to try to sit down and watch, and started kind of learning about it, and you know, picked a favorite player and all that kind of stuff. And before long, I thought, where has this been my whole life? I love baseball. I really do. I love it. And it's been one of the best things that I've done as a mom of 4 boys, because even still today, you know, if I don't have anything else to talk about with them, we can talk about baseball. And that's something that we still enjoy, watching games together, going to games together. We play fantasy baseball as a family, and it's just something fun that we can do. So take an interest in something that your husband likes, because it will provide opportunities for you to spend time together. It will provide, you know, conversation topics if you like to talk. So yeah, taking an interest in something he likes to do is very, very healthy.
Number 6, pray with and for your husband. Pray with, and so you to ask your husband, what can I pray about for you today? Or catch him before he leaves and go, can I ask God to bless your day today at work? Whatever it is. But pray with and for your husband. Prayer is such an important thing. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And then lastly, flirt. We'll mention that one more time because husbands like that. Maybe you should ask your husband, what's a way that I flirt with you that you think is fun? But he probably likes it when you flirt with him a lot. So let's wind this up. Let me tell you a quick story, and we're actually going to ask God to bless our marriages. We'll have a prayer. We'll take another, actually, we're going to move right into that next, it's real short. We'll move right into that next session right after this, but we're going to ask God to bless our marriages. We'll move right into that next session. I'm doing it. It's a little 10-minute, 12-minute session, then we'll take another break. So this is a lady from our community in Childress that I did not know very well. I had been trying to get to know her, but she called me and she said, my husband has died. Would you be willing to do his funeral service? And I said, absolutely. I found out his name was Pete. This has been a few years ago. So I went over to Claudia's house and sat down with her and talked a little bit about the service. We were going to have it at the funeral home. And I asked her a question. I said, tell me a little bit about Pete. So she told me about what he did and that they'd been married 55 years and just a few little odds and ends that I thought I can work with kind of this and talk a little bit about some of this in the funeral service. And so the day came where we had Pete's service, and after it was over, before we went out to the cemetery, everybody goes through the line and then they go right out the door. And it just so happened somehow or another, Claudia was the last person out and her family had gone on out for one reason or another. And so it was her and me, and I was standing at the front of this casket, and I thought, well, I don't want her to stand by herself. So I moved around by her and put my hand on her back, and I said, we're in no hurry, Claudia. You just take your time, and we'll sit here as long as you want to sit here with Pete. And she said, she looked up at me, and she said, there were a couple of things that I failed to tell you. And I wasn't sure where she was going with this. And I said, like what? She said, well, I told you that we had been married 55 years. What I didn't tell you was that they were 55 really, really good years. And I smiled and I thought, that is wonderful. She said, can I tell you a few things that he used to do? And I said, absolutely. She said, did you know that Pete brought me flowers every month since we married until last month, just before he passed away? Every month he would bring me fresh flowers, and I would put them on my table in a vase, and he would do that for me because he says he loved me. She said, did you know every morning when we got up, when we first saw each other in the morning, he would come over and kiss me on the cheek and say, good morning, beautiful. How did you sleep last night? And every night before bed, he would take my hand, say a quick prayer, and kiss me on the forehead and say, sleep well, my love. She said, he called me Hazel. And I said, why did he call you Hazel? And she said, my eyes are hazel. And she went on to tell me some very intimate details about how good Pete had treated her as a wife and him as a husband. She turned at that point and spoke to Pete. And she said, Pete, I love you. Thank you for being so good to me. She leaned over and kissed him on the forehead and said, I will see you soon. And she put her hand in my hand under my arm, and I patted her, and she said, I'm ready now. And I felt like I had listened in on a very intimate conversation between her and Pete. But I'd stood there and I'd listened, and I walked her to the limousine where we would now take Pete out to the cemetery and bury him. I got her situated in the limousine, and I went back to my vehicle, which was actually in front as I was going to lead them out to the cemetery. And it's usually at that point that I think, okay, what verse do I want to use at the cemetery? But I couldn't focus on any of that because the only thing that I could think about was, how can I be more like Pete? And what can we do to raise up more men like Pete and women like Claudia, marriages like theirs? What can we do? And I remember I stopped right there and prayed and said, Lord, would you please raise up more men like Pete? Men who will bring their wives flowers for 55 years, who will hold their hand and kiss them on the cheek and call them beautiful daily. We need more marriages like that. But they don't happen by accident. They take work. They take effort. And they take love. Let's take a second and let's ask God to bless our marriages. If you're with your spouse, would you hold their hand and ask God? We're going to ask God to bless us, and then we'll move into that next session. Father, we thank you for our marriages. We do a lot to mess them up. We're prideful. We're selfish. We say things we shouldn't. We apologize for that. We want to build a marriage, Father, that blesses us and honors you, that blesses our children and our grandchildren. Father, if we can get to the end of our life and hold our spouse's hand when we're in our 80s and say we have built a great marriage, we have accomplished a great thing in this world. Thank you, Father, for giving us the ability to love and to be loved. Thank you for marriage. Bless every marriage and family represented here. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. So we have been talking about prayer. So let's take a second, turn that page. I want to give you 7 quick things that you can pray about for your family. You see that on that? And we'll pull up that little PowerPoint real quick. Now, this is just so. A lot of people go, okay, so what do I pray about? How am I going to be praying about this? So let me give you just some simple things. You can put this by your table. You can put this by your nightstand. And you can just use this to go down and say, Lord, help me do this and this and this and this, to give you some ideas for prayer. Okay, so right off the bat, we want to thank God for our marriage, okay? We want to tell God, thank you for our marriage. We are always most grateful for things that we are thankful for. We don't take for granted things that we are most thankful for. So if we are constantly telling God how thankful that we are for our marriage and for our spouse, it will make a big difference. There's a lot of days, I have no doubt Lee would love to choke her husband. There are days where we love each other, but we may not like each other real well that day. You understand that. Some days their marriage is like that. But you know, my attitude changes when I say, Lord, thank you for Lee, and thank you for my wife, and thank you for my marriage. Makes a big difference. It helps me to move past the negativity and to be reminded just how blessed I am, even though everything doesn't always go the way that I want it to go. Jesus said, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, and that's Satan. He wants to steal and kill. He wants to steal your marriage. He wants to kill your marriage. He wants to destroy your marriage. Jesus says, but I've come to give you life. And the life that he uses in that text is the word Zoe, which means life on this earth. Jesus says, I come to give you the best kind of life you can have here when you do it my way. And sometimes we just need to remember to be thankful for that good that we have in our life. The second thing, ask God to bless your spouse and to bless you as a spouse. You know, the only thing that you can really change is yourself. You can ask God to change your spouse or help your spouse to see things, but you can focus on yourself and you can focus on being the best spouse that you can be. One of the things that you can do is say, Lord, help me as a spouse to be patient with my wife or my husband. Help me to see things from their point of view. What we tend to do is we tend to oftentimes hurt those that love us the most. And sometimes the very things that your spouse does that either annoys you or hurts you, sometimes they don't even know that they've done anything. And when we can pray and say, Lord, help me to be a good forgiver. Lord, help me to be a good spouse. There was several years ago, on a Sunday morning, we're getting ready to go to church. and Lee points out that there's a closet door open in our room where I keep kind of some Sunday kind of clothes. And she said, I don't remember what she said. It wasn't really what she said. It was how she said it. A little bit of a tone about that door's been open for, I've had to shut that door that you've been in there like the last 3 times you've been in that closet. Well, that, instead of just saying, hey, would you do a better job shutting the door, it came across wrong, and it kind of frustrated me. In fact, when I went over and shut the door, I shut it just a little bit hard, like, yeah, I'll show you, And what I found was, over the next month, every time I got in that closet, I would pull that old conversation back up, and it would kind of make me mad. And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. That's happened over a month ago, and every time I get something out of this closet, I push this door shut and think, well, there you go, ma'am. And so I called her in. I said, I need to apologize to you. I said, I have for a month held a grudge that I didn't even realize I was holding, but every time I go in the closet, I get mad at you. And I explained to her, I said, do you remember that Sunday morning when this happened and you said this and you did this? And you know what she said? You ready for this? She said, I don't even remember saying that. She said, I didn't even realize that I either had a tone or came across. I don't even remember the conversation. And in my head, I thought, I have carried this around for a month. When she didn't even realize any. Sometimes we're that kind of people who we just automatically, we kind of carry that grudge, whatever it is, against a spouse that's done this or didn't do this or they should have known. And sometimes the best thing we can do is when we ask God, help us as a spouse, we begin to see things that maybe they didn't do wrong, maybe we just took it wrong. Look at the third one. Ask God to give you wisdom as parents. This is so important. Ask God to give you wisdom as parents. I love the story. You can just write this down if you're taking notes. Judges 13, the story of a guy named Samson. Actually, he hadn't even been born. But an angel comes to Samson's mama. Just mama. That's the only one. Dad's out working in the field. Comes to Samson's mama and goes, hey, you're going to have a really special kid about this time next year. You're going to have to raise him in a special way. He is going to be set apart for God. And he's going to do great things. That evening, her husband comes home and goes, hey, how was your day? Anything exciting happened today? Can you imagine this? She said, well, you're not going to believe it, but an angel came. I can't even imagine. If I came in and Lee goes, hey, angel stopped by today. I'd be like, what? Said an angel came. We're going to have a baby next year. And he's going to be special and set apart for God. And her husband goes, well, did you ask him questions on how we're supposed to raise him? She goes, well, no, I didn't think about that. And he goes, you didn't ask questions on this? And she goes, no, Anyway, I'm sure there was a little bit of debate back and forth, but they start praying, Lord, please send that man back. We got questions. We need his wisdom, basically is what they were saying. We need this man's wisdom. We need your wisdom to find out how we raise this kid. God sent him back. I'm always learning from that as parents. Maybe we should be praying, Lord, give us wisdom. Teach us. Send somebody in our world that will help us raise a kid that is strong-willed or stubborn or is a teenager at this time. Send somebody into our world, whatever it is, another person, another parent that's been there and done that. But we should be praying for wisdom. Wisdom to be better dads and better moms. I didn't have a dad the first 5 years of my life. My dad died early of cancer. I told you I came from a blended family. My dad passed away when I was a little boy. Don't remember him. I wanted a dad more than anything. I remember looking around when I was a kid going, hey, that guy would work, and my mom going, hush, we don't just marry people. Because I had 2 sisters, I wanted a dad. I wanted a guy in my world. God put a man in my world. His name was Lawrence. My mom met him about a year and a half later. He was a widower. His wife had died in a car accident. He bravely chose to ask my mom to marry him, making a family of 4 and a family of 3, a family of, 4 kids on one side and 3 on the other, a family of 9 when you add the parents in there, to live in a little 3-bedroom house. I asked him the other day, I said, Dad, what were you thinking? He goes, it was the right thing to do. He's always been so wise. I've asked him oftentimes, how did you how did you know how to do it? He said, we just prayed for wisdom all the time in our family, asking God, how do we do this? How do we blend this family? He was such a wise man, still is. He's the guy that I call now and go, hey, what should I do? Wisest man I know. It's not always from years of experience or mistakes that he's made that he's learned how to do things right. That is that, but it's also because he's just prayed for wisdom, and God has given him an amazing amount of wisdom. And you know, God says he'll give you wisdom too. You just simply have to ask for it. James chapter 1, if you lack wisdom, ask God, who gives it graciously. Doesn't say, you want wisdom? Read books. Doesn't say that. Want wisdom? Experience life. Doesn't say that. Want wisdom? Ask God. When I left for college, I went off and did 1 year of school without Lee while I was waiting on her to graduate from high school. It was the longest, most boring part of my life. I didn't like that at all. And my mom would write letters. This was the 80s. We didn't have cell phones. Long distance cost money. But I'd get a letter from Mom like every 2 days. And she never, I still have those letters, she never closed a letter that she didn't remind me, P.S., pray for wisdom. Pray for wisdom. It was some of the best advice she ever gave me. I prayed for wisdom. God gave me wisdom. God also gave me a wife, and she's very wise. It's amazing what God will do. Ask God to give you wisdom. God will send you wisdom in lots of different ways. Look at the next one. Pray daily for your children. Pray daily for your children. I have on my phone a reminder set. It goes off at 1:27 every day. And it now says pray for my family. It used to say pray for my boys. I now have 2 daughter-in-laws and grandkids. Now it says pray for my family. It's my reminder every day I stop and give God thanks for my family. You say, why 1:27? Well, we read from Psalm 127 last night. That's kind of always been our little text that reminds me children are a blessing from the Lord. Do you remember that text? So I pray for my kids. My kids know every day I pray for them. Some days I send them a text and go, hey, I'm going to pray for you all in a minute. You got anything you want me to pray about? Sometimes they send me stuff. Sometimes I just tell them, hey, I prayed for you all today, 127 passed, but they know. Sometimes we're driving down the road. Lee will go, hey, 127, your reminder just went off. I said, well, let's pray and ask God to bless our kids. It's healthy. If you have adult children or teenage children or college children, can I say one of the best things you can do for your kids is about twice a week, send a message saying, is there anything I can be praying about in your world? You will find out, number one, that there's some things that they would love for you to pray about. Number two, you'll find out some things going on in their world that you did not know. It will give you conversation with your kids, and you'll all of a sudden be reconnected with your kids because all of a sudden you're praying about things for your kids that you can go, all right, I prayed for that test on Thursday. How did that go? You should be asking your kids all the time with a text message, what can I be praying about? I said that in a sermon in Childress last year, I think it was, and a mama went home and she said, man, I have a hard time. My grown married son, we don't talk a whole lot on the phone. We text occasionally. She said, I'm always looking for ways to connect with him. She said, I went home and sent a message and said, what are some things I can pray about? She said, for the last 2 weeks, we have had great conversation of things that I'm praying about for him. She said, I'm amazed at how this has opened doors of conversation for us. Pray for your children. That's so important. Pray for your future as a married couple. Your life is going to change. Your marriage is going to change. You're going to have some toddlers. Some of you got toddlers. And then you're going to turn around and they're going to start school, and your marriage is going to change, and your life is going to change. And then that last one will start school, and you're going to have some changes in your marriage. You should be praying about these so that for what's going to change, you pray for your future. There's going to come a time when you send your first one off to college, and some things are going to change, and you should be already praying about those things. There's going to come a time when you're thinking, man, that'll be a long ways off, but there'll come a time when that last one will leave the home to go to college, and you'll have empty nest. You should be praying about that right now. Pray for your future as a married couple because things change. And it's important for you to stay ahead of things. Here's another one, 2 more, and we'll take our break. Ask God to protect your marriage from Satan. I find it interesting in the prayer, the prayer where they ask Jesus, Lord, teach us how to pray. One of the things he says is, lead us not into temptation. Yet we don't talk about that a whole lot or pray that. Lord, protect me from Satan. Help us to watch out for temptation. Satan would love nothing more than to wreck your marriage. He would love nothing more than to wreck mine. And the worst thing you can do is to sit back and think, that won't ever happen to us. Because when you start thinking like that, that's when he'll get you. That's when he'll get you. And he has taken down some great marriages of some great people, some strong Christian marriages that simply gave him a little bit of an inch and he took a foot. Be very cautious, and you pray, Lord, help us to see Satan in his schemes and help us to keep our priorities straight. So important. Number 7, ask God to help you see the good, not bad, in your spouse and in your children. You probably noticed this. When you were newlyweds, or if you know any newlyweds, we have some newlyweds in here, a couple of years. When you're newlyweds, everything your new spouse does is awesome. How's marriage? It's so awesome. He carries out the trash, and she does this, and you're like, give them some time, okay? They're going to drive you nuts. Give them some time. People who've been married for 35 years or somewhere close to that, or even 14 years, what they tend to do is instead of seeing all the awesome things their spouse does, they see all the things that their spouse does that kind of drives them nuts. And you focus on the wrong things. If I spent all day looking for the things that Lee does that drives me nuts, I'd find them. And it would be the only things I could see. But if I work hard to notice all the good things that she does, those are the things that I'll notice. You're gonna find what you're looking for. And if you want to find in your marriage everything that's wrong with it, you'll find it. Or if you want to find out just how awesome your spouse is, you'll focus on those things. So maybe you should ask God to help you see the good and not the bad in your spouse and in your family. Focus on those good things. Your children and your marriage should have 5 more compliments to 1 criticism, 5 to 1 ratio. For every time you're critical, you should be given 5 compliments. It's a pretty good ratio. Divorce rate drops to 12% in those marriages, Gottman says, where you give more praise than criticism. Paul said in Ephesians, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth except what will build others up. That's not criticism. That's praise. We need to do a good job praising. So here's what we're going to do. Let's take a break. We hadn't had one in a little while. We'll start back at about 11:15. We'll close out with the last session and a really, really good video that you need to see, and then we'll ask God's blessing upon our marriages and families again. All right, let's take a break.